giving you useful and practical tips to help you make more money selling travel. This is the Art of Selling Travel Podcast, and here to guide you through it all, your host, Glenda Beagle.
Well, this week we have something absolutely fantastic for you. It's brand new. It's actually a cruise line that I really have almost zero expert or knowledge on. But what I do have is a relationship that goes back with the business development manager, Eric, that goes back many, many, many years. And if Eric is chatting about it, then I wanted to know more about it. So welcome.
Thank you, Glenda. Very happy to join you this morning.
Awesome. So the company you are with is Swan Hellenic, which is more of like an adventure, sustainable cruise line from what I can see.
Yeah, we stamp ourselves as cultural expedition, truly, that was started in the 1950s by Mr. Swan and his son. And they started doing cultural expedition in Turkey and Greece for the Hellenic Society of London, hence the fact of Hellenic in our name. So it was kind of the precursor of any type of expedition that you can see today. They're kind of the one that started it at that time.
That's fantastic. Now, you and I were kind of chatting a little bit before we got going. We hear a lot about sustainable tourism, a lot about sustainability, things like that. In a lot of ways, I sometimes start to get the impression that it's just the in buzzword that's going on in the industry right now. What does sustainable tourism mean?
Sustainable tourism means, in simple terms, to not add up on your footprint to where you're visiting. You try to not disturb either the wildlife, the fauna, or even the cities and villages that you might be visiting. It's to keep it as much as possible close to zero as the impact that you're going to bring when you're going to a specific destination. Even more when we talk about polar regions where we are sailing, where I often say that we are a visitor. We don't live there. The people or the marine life or the fauna is there. That's their land. We're just visiting, so we don't want to disturb anything of that sort. So, in simple terms, I think that would be what sustainability tourism would be.
I love it. And actually, as you're talking about that, my brain totally chased a squirrel. Growing up in Alberta, I am a country girl. I live in the city now. Big adjustment. But, I'm a farmer's daughter. And every year, this time of year in the summer, all those beautiful wedding photos are being taken of people who are standing in the middle of a canola field and it's beautiful and this, that, the other. But so many times they don't actually own that canola field and they have absolutely no idea the damage they're doing to those poor farmers as they're knocking all the blooms off. They're, all of the damage that gets done just so they get that spectacular photo that they think nobody else is going to have, except, I'm sorry, double check the portfolio of your photographer. That's why you chose them. That's why you chose this time of year, because you wanted that exact same photo. But it does damage, and that happens here. And I can totally see where that could happen in other destinations.
And it's also learning of why it's like that in that region, also, and why we don't want to disturb this area. So there's many factors in the sustainability aspect of things.
That's awesome. So now you did touch on the polar region just a little bit in there. This is what I love about Eric. And this is like sales 101. I didn't ask him about his destinations. I asked him about sustainability, but he was able to drop that little nugget in there. And you want to make sure that you're always building curiosity with your clients. And so he dropped in polar. And while I was going to talk about destinations later, I'm sorry, I just got to know, what do you guys do with the polar regions and how do you guys make that happen?
Well, we use our ship to go to the polar regions, and there's been a lot more focus on Antarctica and the Arctic, including Svalbard, which is somewhat part of Norway, Greenland, and even the northern part of Canada. And with our ships, is to be able to go to that area and really bring the knowledge and the comprehension of the environment that we're visiting. And as I said, it's getting a little bit more popular. We have to be careful in the word popular. These are not destinations for necessarily everybody, either from an interest or from necessarily wanted to go to those destinations. But for myself, that I have been in 2020 in Antarctica, I have to say that it's absolutely unbelievable, because it's landscapes and marine wildlife that you cannot see or experience anywhere else in the world. And it shows you in a way how humans are small in that vast environment that you're visiting. So if we keep with the sustainability that you started, Glenda, with the ships that we use, we make sure in the way that they were built that they do not add to any pollution or destroying the environment. So everything that was done technologically from anchors that we do not use. So I mean, there's a GPS repositioning, so we don't drop any anchors in that part of the world. Oh, and also the engine that are the most technical and not being very polluting. There's nothing at the moment, unfortunately, that do not, but we have the latest technology that adds very little in that, until we are able to add full battery power in those regions and have a zero impact, which would be absolutely amazing. But also, we're not far from it. We're just a very few years away from it.
That's awesome. And I would suspect that being sustainable is something that attracts your type of a client, because you don't go to places like this with the idea of dropping your fast food bags and that's not the type of client that you guys are going to attract. Now, what I did want to touch on is the fact that you are in fact a cruise line, but you're also into destinations that a lot of other ones don't go. You do it in a way that other people don't do. And, when I go to your website, it's that cultural experience, and it leads towards more that adventure. I love to be immersed in culture. I love to get out, see the landscape, everything else. I don't love the idea of climbing up a cliff in order to see it. Actually, we were in Iceland and we were hiking behind a waterfall. And I can't remember if it was the guide that told us or if there's a sign. It was the guide that told us, careful, there will be no handrails because we are not ruining our landscape because you're not smart enough to realize you could kill yourself. And I'm like, that's cool. I appreciate that. And then I was climbing behind the waterfall on the slippery, slidey mud. And I'm like, I could really use a handrail right now. But the thing is, though, is that I myself always get a touch bit nervous, a touch bit hesitant about what does this type of thing look like? So if I was to ask you, what makes you the same as other cruise lines, so that I can kind of feel where would my comfort zone fit within that?
Mm-hmm. Well, on board of our ships at Swan Hellenic, you're going to find great food. So, I mean, great food, you can find it online. And if I can say, it's an extension on board. So you won't feel like a fish out of water, really, because you're going to have great food on board. And I think this is what you find also with many other cruise lines that are offering specialty restaurants. So for us, the specialty restaurant is your regular restaurant, literally. So if you're a foodie, you're going to feel very comfortable on board of our ships. And we have associations also with very top chefs. We just have one with the young chefs of Europe, actually, that they come on board on certain of our sailings and they display what they do best. So if this is something that attracts you, that will definitely be a good fit. And also great service. I mean, if you are taking a vacation, that you are going anywhere in the world, you want to have a great service. You're paying, you're working hard for your money, and you want to have the great service that goes with the vacation that you're choosing. This is what you're going to find as well. There's an amazing service, very, very personalized. Also, the comfort of your stateroom of your choice. And our staterooms have a pretty good size, even from the lower category and on our ships. So you want to have staterooms, even though you might not, the staterooms might not be the focus of your vacation, though when you come back to it, you want to make sure that your bed is comfortable. There's a lot of space for you to be around also, and all the services that a room would offer from a hotel or from a ship. And I would say, and I would add also, lastly, the probably being curious. I mean, if you're traveling, if you're leaving the comfort of your home to go somewhere, it's because you're curious. You're curious to discover something. And that's what you're going to find also with Swan Hellenic, that your curiosity will definitely be triggered in many areas, not to say all the areas that we're visiting. So I think that from a mass market perspective to a niche, I would say those would mostly be the similarities.
That's awesome. So in talking about staterooms, because I am a little bit of a stateroom snob, and then I think of polar regions, things like that. Do you actually have balconies on your ships?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we don't have inside categories on the ships.
Okay.
Since we're diving in a little bit. So they're all outside, and 80% have a balcony option.
Okay.
And even the ocean view room, which I've experienced when I was sailing in May, is very good. Absolutely, very, very good. Yeah,
that's awesome. That's awesome.
Allow me, Glenda, also, because you were mentioning about expedition, and it's kind of like, puts your thinking cap. You're wondering, and expedition is not anymore what the explorer did in the late 1800s and 1900s today. And that's what you see with like ships like ours, where it's mostly that you want to discover areas of the world differently. You want to be part of where you're going. You want to be you don't want to be apart from the people you're visiting. You almost want to feel like a friend or a family member, and that's what expedition is. So if you want to go up a mountain, up a volcano, if you want to go and kayak, you'll have the ability to do that. But if this is not your thing, then you would have options of doing something more softer, of maybe a walking or a very soft hiking also, or just a discovering of a city or a town.
I love it. So now in your fleet, you have 3 ships, is it?
Correct.
Okay. And about how many people would they find on those ships?
So we have 2 ships that are our sister ships, the Vega and the Minerva, that are 152 passengers, full capacity. And the new one that was christened on May 4th is the Diana, and she is 192 passengers.
Wow. So that's very similar to kind of the space they would find, say, on a river cruise or something like that then.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. Very, very similar, very cozy, more personable as well.
Okay. So it's not a lot of people. So when you do come into port or things like that, it's not that you're going to be lined up with thousands of people. It's not even 500. It's less than 200 people. That's incredible. Yeah.
It's definitely not an invasion. I mean, you really feel that You're just going to be part of, and the people also seeing smaller ships like that don't feel, in quotes, threatened. It's just like, oh, okay, there's just a few people coming around, and you don't feel that you're just invading a space, a city, especially when we are in smaller areas, like in Africa. Sometimes we're like in smaller villages, or in Asia as well, that you don't feel that overwhelming feeling of a cruise ship.
Okay. I love that because, yeah, for some people, the idea of crowds, especially, some people don't want me to say it, but in a post-COVID era, some people still aren't 100% ready to be in amongst all the other people and that sort of thing. I myself have gone on the large mass market ships since then. I think everybody's doing a great job of trying to alleviate the fears, but especially for those that enjoy those smaller ones. I got to go to the Asta River Cruise Expo this past year. And so, I was on and off of a multitude of ships there. And there is just something different about the small, like the size. There's something really special about that. So I think being able to go see some of these destinations with just that handful of people, you really will get to kind of know everybody.
Absolutely. And that's a good point that I was going to bring you. That's the personal touch that you get. I mean, after not even a day, everybody on the ship knows your name, what you don't like, what you like, what you drink, what you don't drink, and so on. So that's why you really feel that you just have an extended family that is traveling with you, looking forward to same or in similar experience and adventures.
Well, that's awesome. So now we've talked about what makes you the same as, say, a mass market ship, but now let's talk about what makes you different.
And the size of the ship, that's definitely a big one, right?
Yeah.
Right from the get-go. People that will come and sail on an expedition, sailing like at Swan Hellenic, it's to enrich themselves with either a culture or an area of the world. And on board, we don't have shows or entertainment and so on.
Okay.
We leave it to those that can do it best. We centralize and focus on our lecturers. Now, our lecturers could be from our expedition team, and the expedition team on board take care of our guests, making sure that they are comfortable on board, but also ashore. Wherever we are, they are always present, and we make sure that they are well taken care of with questions or any concerns or anything of that sort. But also on board, many are specialists in a field. They could be a historian, they could be an ornithologist, they could be a specialist of penguins, and so on and so forth. And they will share that with lectures on board, as well as guest lecturers. So certain times in the year, we have guest lecturers that are specialized in any type of fields that will come and share these experiences with our guests, and sometimes even have specific and specialized excursions for them to be with and experience the world in a different way. And we just have an association. We ended in March with the SETI Institute, which is part of NASA, and it stands for the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. So there are scientists that are coming on board and doing these lectures. They're guest lecturers, but also they do research on board of our ships. And the guests have a chance to mingle with them, talk with them, and see also the research that they're doing. Well, that's definitely another feature that we have differently. And also the way we might go out of the ship. In many places, we use our zodiacs. Now, you don't need to be you can be a deep adventurer as the other side of the spectrum and not. It's not complicated to use a zodiac as well. So sometimes we might just use them to go and land, and or in certain instances, we just use the tenders as well.
Awesome.
Yeah, so that would be probably the bigger feature that you would have, and as a big difference.
So I do have a question. When you talk about the lecturers and this, that, the other, so this is where my brain goes, and this is where I struggle with it. Are they super intellectual, or do they actually translate into human talk?
They translate in human talk. They'll use big words, but they'll explain these complicated words and so on. So you don't have to know a subject in deep to be part of that lectures or anything of that sort. No, they make it in. They make sure it's all in layman terms and everybody understands. And that's the point of a lecturers. They don't want to leave their at the end of their presentation and nobody understood anything. That's not the point. They want to make sure that everybody understood the everything that they've explained and the reason why they're doing the lectures and any of the research that they're doing linked to those lectures.
That's awesome. I remember being on a mass market once and going to what they called a lecture, and it was actually all about how much food they brought on, like all the stats. And I found that like beyond fascinating, disturbing, but fascinating beyond everything else. But when and for me, this is a big objection, and I think it might be for a lot of clients. When you hear scientists and you hear the word lecture and other such, I almost start to nod off as it is. I remember being in high school and my science teacher was completely monotone, never there was no way I was making it through that class. I went home and I said to my mom and dad, I'm like, I don't need chemistry. Please let me drop it. And they were, no. Then they had to go to the first parent teacher conference. My dad came home. He's like, yeah, you can drop that class. And I said, what changed? He goes, I couldn't stay awake in 10 minutes. And so, so when I hear lectures, I have like this childhood flashback to my grade 10 chemistry class. And so that, and the reality is as somebody in the sales side, and, if this is your first time tuning into my podcast, yes, you are in sales. If you sell travel, guess what? You sell. You don't just plan vacations. You don't just help design and curate and pick whatever fancy word you want to use. You are in sales. And when you're in sales, you're going to bring your own biases into it. And I will fully admit, when I hear the term lecture and I hear the term scientist, I flip right back to grade 10 chemistry class, 3 periods in the afternoon on a Friday afternoon. And I slept so good through that class. And so it does trigger that for me. And I think when we're looking at, especially things that are not as mass market, you can sell mass market with slides and spectacular shows and 87 different dining, there's something for everybody there. This is something that's really unique and special. And so it's really important as somebody in sales that you recognize that you're going to be bringing in your own biases, but also to what are some of those objections your clients are going to have? What are the objections that you might not even know that they have, or that might be sitting there, but all it takes is that one quick answer, as quick as Eric, when I was asking about sustainable, was able to lay in when we do the polar, you can have those conversations. So when you talk about the fact that, no, we don't have the big Broadway show, we have these spectacular lectures where you're going to learn so much, but good news, they're not going to put you to sleep either, and things like that. So Eric, you're in the field, you're dealing with travel advisors on the ongoing. What do you hear as some of the biggest objections that they face with their clients?
The adventure, like you explained a little earlier, like how I'm my client, or I am not an adventurer and I don't want to hike or walk and so on. That's usually that's what is associated with expedition that we need to demystify, because it's not as much the case anymore. As I said, you can have it. You want to do it, we'll have it for you. But you don't have any interest, well, there's other opportunities to discover at your own pace, at your own level also. So I think that's one of the biggest objections as well. I think there's sometimes when we talk about expedition, there's a price tag that comes to it as well, because of where you are sailing. And in those regions, it definitely brings a certain amount to pay for, but it's when you look at it, it's everything in. Like you don't have much extra to pay. It's really in with everything. So you need to make sure that you calculate everything together and not just the price tag, but everything that comes with it, and considering of where you're gonna go in the world. With if we want, we're talking about the mass market and so on, there's certain areas that the mass market will not go because of the size of their ships and some interest, generally speaking, of their clientele. So that comes into play also for that price tag. But don't let you and your clients necessarily be off by that price tag, and really check and see what you have included in it, and the experience that you will get at the end of your sailing.
Absolutely. And I think sometimes we all default to price, and we definitely let our clients default to price unless and until we understand the value. And in fact, I was recently doing a training for a company, and it was what really resonated was the fact that you don't know what they will see value in until you know what they value. It does not matter how much something costs if there's no context to it. You can have a client who would drop $250,000 in a heartbeat if they saw value, but yet you can't sell them something for $20,000 because they don't see value. It's your job. Again, this is where that sales part kicks in. You've got to put context into what it is. And I think Eric's done a great job of getting that started. What all is included with Swan Hellenic?
Actually, if you allow me, I would say what is not, because the list is going to be a lot smaller.
Love it.
In reality, 3 things. Spa treatments. I know many would like to have that included, but unfortunately it is not.
Well, they've also got to encourage them to get off the ship. If spa treatments were included, nobody would ever get off the ship.
Some top shelf drinks that are not included, and optional excursion, though we include one already in the price per port that we visit. So anytime we make a stop at a port, there's an excursion that is included. So for us, when you look at the price, well, that's it. There's no addition, there's no taxes or anything at gratuities. It's all in there. So it makes it easy for a travel advisor to see what's in with that pricing, because that's all in. Even the transfers. So we include transfers the day before at the port of departure, the overnight in a 4 or 5-star hotel, the transfers to the ship, and at the end from the ship to the airport. So that's really all in it.
I love that, because it's those nickel and dime factors. I always have said, you've got to look at what the experience is. That's what's going to determine the price. Again, it's the location, it's the type of travel, things like that. But when you're comparing an apple and an orange in some ways, it might cost you very little to get on board a ship, but what is it going to cost you to get back off of it? And I think, whether you're talking mass market or you're talking something more in the expedition or the premium, there's a lot of cruise lines that will offer you based on price point because they know it's easier to sell on price point. Never fall into the trap of selling on price. You're going to lose every time. Instead, if it costs you more to get on board, it's going to cost you a whole lot less, potentially nothing, to get back off of that ship again. And I don't know about you, but if you are working for a commission, which by the way you are, but you're also going to charge fees, just getting that in there, you're going to get commission on the whole shebang, not just that real cheap. I legit have done cruises, I kid you not, where the commission was $6.04. Who builds a business on that? Do you have any concept how much harder that cruise is to sell than something like this? Because when people can understand the value that something like an expedition cruise is going to provide for them, and when they've got all of these things included and they're going to experience destinations and ports and cultures and animals and things that they would never see anywhere else, this is so much easier to sell than something that's going to give you $6.04. So I just have a couple quick questions before we wrap up here. Swan Hellenic, amazing, hitting destinations we wouldn't otherwise hear of. But, and I anticipate a lot of your clients are possibly more towards the retirement scale, would you say? Or are we still a lot of people that are more in the working full-time type era?
The average age is around 65. If we look at all the itineraries that we do, because of course we have some that are a little longer. But if I pinpoint to even Antarctica, I've seen that for a few years now, where the average age is getting a little lower. You have more interest of people in their 30s or in their 40s. But overall, for us at Swan Hellenic, it's around 65 of age. And our guests are 65, 70% North Americans.
Okay.
And the rest international, but not to forget about English-speaking country like the UK and Australia and South America, South Africa, I should say, and New Zealand.
Okay. So is there Wi-Fi on board? Because I'm just thinking if you've got that younger generation, they're possibly still got to stay connected with work or whatever. My goal is to travel the world and just work as I go.
You can. Wi-Fi is included. It's all in with that. Just a little caveat here to consider that when you are in polar regions, sometimes it could be a little harder for the connection. But other than that, connection is pretty good.
So you're saying in the polar regions, it's like cruise ship internet from like 2014.
We could say that, Glenda. We could say that. For a few hours.
We're just putting some context on it.
Exactly.
It's there.
That's good.
I remember those commercials. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? But here's the deal. You're going to the polar region. Put your freaking cell phone away. Just enjoy where you're at. Don't step anywhere you're not supposed to, and take your pictures and live in the moment and just love it. What would you, if somebody has never sold Swan Hellenic and they're not even sure if they have the clients, how would you suggest they go about trying, like, where would they start? How would they start to decide whether or not they possibly even have somebody in their database that this might be a good fit for?
I would say to start probably, and some people might like this comparison, some might not. If you have clients that are already doing river cruising, if you already have clients that are doing specific areas of the world that are a little bit off the beaten path, or even some resorts, as a matter of fact, are a little bit different than the mass market, let's say, I think that would be a good start to see with them what they think about an expedition or an exploration. Sometimes you could just use exploration cruising. So it might be a little bit less scary to people than using expedition, but it's not as scary as it used to be, as I explained earlier in our discussion. I think that would be a good start in looking in your database, and make yourself familiar with the destinations by reading, by going on our website. Also see what we do in Antarctica and Africa and Asia and so on and so forth. But make yourself familiar also of what is an expedition today with a cruise line, and see if that might trigger also, and say, hey, you know what? I think there's Mr. and Mrs. Smith that would probably be good for that, because they might not be the one for Antarctica, but they might be one for Africa. There might be one for Australia, but wanting to see it differently. So I think that would be a good start.
That's awesome. The reality is I believe every travel advisor has a client for every product. They just have to put it out there. And I know I've experienced that myself. I remember working with a client. It was actually he was a lawyer. And he would drive to the big city to go book his big trips because he didn't think anybody in the small towns were actually capable of it. If you're not having the conversation, you might be getting their, amazing trip to Vegas that they're doing at like the top penthouse at whatever. I don't even remember which all the casinos are anymore because they all seem to change their names. But you might be getting that. You might be getting somebody willing to pay $4,000 or $5,000 to go to Vegas, which, a lot of people who would sell something like Swan Hellenic, because we've all been taught to niche or this, that, the other, they're like, oh, well, if I do that, then they would never. No, they might be going to somebody else at a bigger place who has talked about these types of trips because they believe they can do it. When I was telling him, I'm like, heck no, I can do that. He's like, oh, I wish I would have known. I just booked a 6-month on, and I'm not going to say the name of a cruise line, but damn, that was a lot of money I missed out on. So I really encourage you to have conversations with your clients, whether it's in person, whether it's on social, dropping a little thing in there. I remember attending a conference years ago and they brought on a luxury expert. He was within the organization and they said to him, can you give us tips? And he said, does not matter what they ask for, on every quote, I drop down an ultra luxury option. He goes, because they never book it, but I've planted the seed for future. And that's what you want to be talking about, because people will talk about it. Maybe all they want to do in the polar region is go see the polar bears. There is other options to go see it. If that is the one and only one and done, we've got options. But if they want to experience polar bears and they want to experience all that the polar region has to offer, well, then that's where something like Swan Hellenic is going to come into play. That's where you're going to be able to fully immerse yourself in. But as Eric was talking about, it's not just the polar region. You guys do spectacular destinations absolutely all around the world, from what I can see.
That absolutely. And we try many times to try to think outside the box. And I'll give you an example here. Like when we sail in the Mediterranean, we do an itinerary from Lisbon to Palermo. And instead of doing on the European continent, we do it with Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia.
Wow.
Many people have done, the Spain and the France and Italy and so on. And they're like, okay, I like the Med. I want to go back, but I'd like to see something different. And here you have the option. So this is one of them. So check out the itineraries that we offer. Because again, even though it's cultural expedition, it's easy in certain destination to access and discover in a different way, really. That's expedition in this case, is really to discover in a different way.
I love it. And when you said that, it triggered for me because yeah, absolutely. Everybody else, they've done the Barcelona, they've done that interior of the Med, if you will. It's thinking differently. I had a client who they had done every river cruise that the cruise line offered, both directions. And they were like, they need to come up with something new. I'm like, well, I can't have them dig you a new river, but this becomes something different. This becomes giving them something, because they don't want to do the big mass market cruise. They didn't want to be with thousands of people, but to hear that they could do they'd already done a lot of those Med and things like that. So to hear you could do it somewhere is different, it's thinking differently. It's listening to what your clients are saying and then stepping away from it and looking at the different ways. Your clients don't know what they don't know. They don't know what's possible. They just know what they don't want. And I get it. A lot of times, this is why I don't like forms on websites. Tell me where you want to go. Most of them don't know. They just know what they don't want, but we never ask them, what do you not want? What did you like the least? Things like that. That's where the gold is, because maybe you put them on a mass market ship, and if you ask them, what did you like least? They're going to list off all the things that you're going to go, wait, you shouldn't be mass market. You should be over with like something that's doing an exploration cruise, where you're going to really get to know the people, really get to have that extension of the service, and really get to dive deep in. So, any final comments from you, Eric?
Well, just to say thank you very much, Glenda, to give me the opportunity to at least demystify Swan Hellenic and to your audience, and talking to them about what we do and how we do things, and little tricks also to help them sell expedition in the future.
Awesome. Well, I love it. I would just want to say thank you so much, Eric. If you are looking for personalized service, great food, and unparalleled access to unique destinations, I encourage you to check out Swan Hellenic for your next cruise client. And we will catch you guys next week. Thanks so much.